Hi, Deirdre.
Hello.
It is so good to see you, my friend, and have you here with Vicki this time.
I'm
Yes,
happy to
hello.
see both of you. Hello.
Hello.
And we're recording this just as Seattle's starting to feel pretty fall-like, getting those cooler mornings. So I'm wondering if you have any favorite ways to celebrate this fall seasonal reset.
That's a really good question because I find that I'm influenced somewhat by the kind of fall we're having. So, in the Northwest, we're pretty well known for having these so-called Indian summers where fall extends and we have warm, warm days, but then the temperatures start to drop a little bit at night. Our fall feels a little bit slow in coming, even though we have the markings of it around us and the beginnings of it. It's a slow wending through the transition from summer to fall, which
Mhm.
I appreciate. One of the things I've been noticing in my practice just recently is that people have had very busy summers and, packed with activity, a lot of it very good, but they're tired
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
oversaturated
Mhm.
and ready to transition to something that has a little bit more of a predictable rhythm. So each
Mhm.
season has its gift. And one of the things I love about the summer is there's more spontaneity. There are more activities we don't do the rest of the year. We're likely to stay up late because our circadian rhythms
Mhm.
are entrained with the longer days, which is important to recognize that one of the reasons we're wild and all over the place is because we're wired to be that way.
Mhm.
The days
Yeah.
are longer.
Mhm.
Um, and as is so perfect in nature, everything has a cycle and an end.
Mhm.
And so I like to start to acknowledge for myself some of the things that stand out from the summer so that I can pause for a moment, anchor it in,
Mhm.
take some time to digest that,
Mhm.
and then be more open to the autumnal energies and what's coming next. What I'm finding or what I see a lot of is this nonstop motion we tend to be in creates a feeling of a blur, and one thing just bleeds into the next. And
Mhm.
the overwhelm comes from not pausing, naming,
Mhm.
anchoring, digesting,
Mhm.
and then going on. Um, so I,
It's
I would say truly that that specific practice is what helps me the most.
Mhm.
Um, and when I was younger, I don't know if it's just an age thing, but I used to get really sad at Labor Day because I knew the days were shortening. I knew I had to go back to
Mhm.
school. And it just seemed like the death of joy and spontaneity in having to go back to doing things like when you're told, how you're told, very boxed up as a
Yeah.
student or a youngster.
Yeah.
And I see that around me, that grief that
Mhm.
it's over and the relief that it's over. So it's
Mhm.
holding both the grief
Mhm.
and the relief.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny because you spent a day with me and my family during the summer
mhm.
break it when we were on vacation, and just, 5 hours, we were so grateful to see you, but it was so funny how it was so unstructured, right? We went from the beach to the pool to it was that flow of exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about, which is
Ex
the long days, the just going with the freedom. Um, so, we just spent one of those days with you, and I love that nugget that you just gave us of holding on to that, to recognize how special
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
as before we shift.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how nourishing it is in its
Mhm.
own way. We have so
Mhm.
many different ways to be nourished, but that unstructured freedom, or a friend of mine called it, let's do the no plan. You know, literally just go wherever you're pulled. It's so wonderful. It's so freeing,
Mhm.
living from that place of desire, pleasure, intuition, connection. You know, for just a minute, there aren't the rules and the shoulds.
Mhm.
And we need that. We need that. We live in a very structured, should-based
Mhm.
paradigm. And so the summer is just, maybe that's what wears us out, is we just get to be so
Right.
wild and unstructured.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there is also, the true biology behind it, which is, the summer is a work hard time when you think about growing our food,
Mhm.
preparing to fill our stores with the growth of the summer, the potatoes, the carrots. People start canning their fruits and vegetables, especially way back because they didn't have a way to refrigerate things. So once you gather the harvest, there's an intense time of work to
Mhm.
have the harvest kept in such a way that it's available all summer, or all winter. And so there really is a very intensive work time in the transition. And maybe the modern day version of that is, um, especially with children, winding all that down, starting to put the things away that you might have out during the summer, the pool, some of the
Mhm.
hiking, the tents, and then starting to prepare for the school year. You know,
Mhm.
what are you going to put in the backpack now? Because what goes into
Mhm.
the backpack now is different than your summer backpack.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that ritual alone, thinking about, and Wynne and I have talked about this a little before, is what do you need in your backpack now? That is another practice that I like to have. And it could be a mental emotional list.
Mhm.
Like what I
Mhm.
had in my backpack during the summer, say, was I love a lot of herbed iced tea.
Mhm.
But I'm
Mhm.
finding in my fall backpack, I want warmer teas or more
Mhm.
Mm.
cinnamony teas, not such
Mhm.
sweet teas.
Mhm.
And in the backpack, I need to let my body acclimate to shorter days, less light, which means
Mhm.
I may be sleepy earlier. And
Mhm.
instead of
Yeah.
being frustrated, I'm not getting as much done, to for a time try to respect the body's request for that, trusting that recalibrating my circadian rhythm to the new light levels will then
Yeah.
put me in a place that's productive, and I can do fine getting done what I need to do. I
Mhm.
don't need to
Mhm.
worry so much about being productive all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I think what Wynne said is the thing that she and I keep coming back to, and you said it so perfectly, Deirdre. It's the allowing the transition. We know it will occur, but building the awareness up,
Mhm,
and also celebrating, what was, but also looking forward to the opportunities that come, in the change
mhm,
of seasons. And I think, when you talked about the routines changing, there are some rituals, that invariably, unfold in fall. There can be more coming together as opposed to dispersing.
mhm,
And as you said, from an agrarian point of view, it was, necessary. There was this pulling in, for
mhm,
safety, getting the
Mhm.
winter stores of food, but there was more in the old days, home and hearth. And I think
Mhm.
mhm,
people that see the opportunity for that, whether it's, returning to more home cooked meals or the savoring that can happen. But I think for a couple of clients that I'm thinking of, if you don't slow down to give that transition out of summer into the next season, into fall, it's due, you do feel like you're just bounced around, and
mhm,
it can feel sudden and jarring, and maybe it's school schedules or
Mhm.
the change in sleep patterns. But there's so much to be said for recognizing the change and leaning into it, accepting the things that maybe are personally satisfying, and maybe the grief and relief you talked about, looking forward to next summer, all of that. But it's the mindfulness that makes it work?
I agree with that, Vicki. And, it doesn't, the transition or some of the ritual around it, I think can be so simple. It doesn't need to be a complicated situation. And in
Yeah.
fact, it really is not optimal when it is, because for those who are already oversaturated and overwhelmed,
Mhm.
if you say, how about doing this and this and this to transition, they're, I've already got, no,
Right.
don't add another
Yeah.
journaling thing for me. Or it can be as simple as, one of the
Yeah.
things I like to do is, and I do this a lot with people I work with. I say, what is the one thing you're going to really miss about summer? What is the one thing you really look forward to about fall?
I
Mhm.
love that.
That
Yeah.
simple. And
Yep.
Mhm.
I always look forward to, in the fall, at least around here, we have available for very short time a few kinds of apples that only
Mm.
come out in September. You can
Yeah.
only get them then. And even within that short range, um, some of them are even last a week or two. Like the co-op will say, we have these apples, when they're finished, they're finished, and they don't
Yeah.
have them all the rest of the year. They even print out their apple list. So on week 2, we will have these from these regions. Week 3. So it's like my ritual. What is the apple situation?
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
And the fresh pressed cider at this time of year is
Oh,
unparalleled. So
yum.
that's something to look forward to instead of the iced tea. So I think, okay,
Mhm.
I'm not going to do iced tea, but I get to do cider now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I
Oof.
start to pull out 1 or 2 candles that maybe in a central location
Mhm.
that
Mm.
begin to signal the shorter days, and how I'm going to add more light by lighting some more candles. There's the
Yeah.
coziness of it, there's the
Mhm.
calm, there's the adding light when darkness comes. It can
Mhm.
symbolize any number of things to us.
Yeah.
Even adding a candle or 2 on the dinner table, just
Mhm.
to symbolize that change and the coming together around that light.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's something about a flame that can be
yes.
really restorative and calming, even in
Mhm.
a candle, small. Mhm.
Small, exactly. And I
Yeah.
really can be the simplest of things, or
Mhm.
recognizing as an individual or as a family when you make your first big batch of soup.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Because hot soup is
Yeah.
not something we make in the summer. It's salad,
Yeah.
it's watermelon, food on the run, which
Right.
is delightful.
Yeah.
I begin to make soup, and I make a bigger batch so that some of it can be frozen or eaten more than once. But it's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
ritual of, like, I'm going to make this soup now, and it's the first soup of the season.
Yes. And
Uh,
doesn't it make the house smell fantastic?
It
Right.
does.
Right? Oh,
And
yeah.
it's again home, hearth, heart.
Yeah.
There's that feeling of, we're going to
Mhm.
have soup,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and it's going to be cozy with our candle. And recognizing
Right.
we might need to do our bedtime rituals sooner because of
Mhm.
the light. So even if you
Right.
don't go to bed sooner, start the rituals sooner to
Yeah.
block the shorter day, so that we're working in synchronization, in honoring of the light
Mhm.
that we're seeing, and then our natural biological relationship to it, which is quite fine tuned. And animals, you see it all the time. They start to gather to hibernate.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They've stored their nuts, and they're special. They have caches of these things where they need to. Um, they the birds have flown the nest, so
Mhm.
they start to migrate to a different place. I mean, it's
Mhm.
all ritual and transition through every
Mm.
Yeah.
facet of our experience.
Yeah. You know what I love about this is my big aha from what you've said so far, is that you've put this feeling of, have I done enough, into that bigger human history experience of,
Mm.
we're
Mhm.
naturally wired for that question.
Yeah.
And it isn't about whether we've swum enough or gone to all the vacation places. It's about storing up, working hard enough at in the fields or
The
Mhm.
harvest.
the harvest.
Mhm.
Have
Mhm.
we done enough to prepare for winter? I mean, you've put that in that bigger picture
Yeah.
that just is, it's mind blowing
Yeah.
that
Yeah. At
that
a DNA level, it's not,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
The question isn't just about whether I've enjoyed myself. The question is really baked into us from
Am I
Yeah.
our,
prepared?
Yeah.
yes.
Do we have what we need to
Mhm.
get through this next season, knowing things may be lean and difficult?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the deeper driving question always is what informs so much is our biological hardwiring to survive at any
Mhm.
cost. And
Yeah.
so if our number one priority is biological preservation and
Yeah.
safety, I think where we get lost is we forget that and misapply it into being hyper productive to the point of exhaustion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All the projects have to be done. The garage has to be cleaned. The walls have to be painted. People are coming. We're already thinking about the holidays. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
Yeah.
take a breath,
Yeah.
Mhm.
break
Yeah.
it down.
Right.
And
Right.
we start chanting, which is interesting. We start chanting a narrative. Winter's coming, people get colds, people get sick, people get the flu. So we're going to be sick. People are going to be sick more. It's like, why
Yeah.
are we chanting this?
Yeah.
We got to get the cold and cough medicine. We have to get our Kleenexes. We have to prepare. We have all this anxiety around illness. And that's part of the narrative that we're doing at this time of year too. Have you gotten your flu shot?
Yeah.
Those things aren't bad. But when we have the narrative so inscribed, are we actually setting ourselves up with the stress, which then wears down the immune system, which
Mhm.
then makes you more vulnerable to the thing
Yeah.
you're afraid of?
Great.
Right. Right.
So,
And it's walking such a tightrope for people, I still think, post COVID, about not wanting to be isolated and alone, but also
right.
protecting, oneself at the same time. And are people threatening because they may have some contagion? It's such a challenge, I think, for people about wanting to gather, like you
Mhm.
said, but then not knowing when other people might be a danger in some way, because there still is some of that phobia, I think, about, and as you said, it's your flu shot, your pneumonia shot, your RSV vaccine. There's a lot of it that just, you get pummeled with it.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Vicki. And I think, something to consider. I think one of the important practices in fall, in addition to things we've talked about, just from a health and wellness standpoint, is because we're coming into closed spaces with more people, and because it's a different rhythm entirely anyway, summer is very much of a kind of a high energy, fiery season. People aren't as likely to be ill in the summer for
Mm,
many reasons.
mm-hmm.
But in the fall, one thing we can do is be more mindful about how we're supporting our immune system.
Okay.
So there, for example, people who tend to be vulnerable, this is a good time to not go on a diet, but eat a little bit more cleanly. So,
Mm-hmm.
clean protein sources. So we have the building blocks we need. Lots of leafy greens because they have a lot of antioxidants to help
Mm-hmm.
us boost our immune. Some people benefit from upping the zinc a little bit
Mm-hmm.
as an immune booster. Some benefit from additional vitamin D if they're not getting outside enough, and they tend
Yeah.
to struggle with SAD, the
Mhm.
seasonal affective disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And vitamin D, there's promising research that has shown low levels are linked with depression. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
a bad idea to get your vitamin D level checked if that's easy,
Yeah.
Mhm.
or add a little bit to your diet. It's not, as long as it's not a huge amount, it's not a harmful
Yeah.
to make.
Yeah. Oh,
Get
those are
plenty of
great suggestions. Oh my
sleep,
gosh.
and
Mm-hmm.
start to pull out the things that revitalize the system. And some of those are like the ginger and cinnamon and
Mm-hmm.
cardamom and warming spices, as they call them. Ginger particularly is very good for digestion. And as we know more and more, one of the things that indicates or supports a healthy immune system is your microbiome. So that's why
Mhm.
eating a little bit more cleanly and consciously bringing down some of the sugar intake that we have during the summer is all in support of that microbiome, which is
Mhm.
so critical to
Mm.
um, not just the immune, but depression and, you know, how
Yeah.
we manage how resilient we feel. We're just beginning to crack that. And I think we're going to find more and more that just having a healthy gut is going to not eliminate the need for a lot of other supplements or medications. There will always be a place for them, but it may not be our default setting. Our default setting might become first really sound nutrition. And
Mhm.
then if that's not doing all that it needs to do for you, what are the adjunctive therapies you can use in addition?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mm.
But to have that baseline be, again, the harvest,
Mhm.
the offerings
Right.
of the season, which is how
Right.
it's meant to be all, you know, it's just
Yeah.
living our nature instead of
Mhm.
overriding it or disregarding it.
Right?
Mhm.
But we don't have to learn anything. We just have to get out of our way and remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
There's
Yeah.
no learning here.
yes.
It's
But
a
listen
Right.
remembering.
listen to our gut on a number of levels.
Oh
Yes, and how
gosh.
can you listen to your gut if the gut isn't digesting properly?
Mhm. Mhm.
If you're not eliminating properly, if you're
Mhm.
not
Right.
absorbing nutrients, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and Deirdre, why is it that some of those like epiphanies about, the power of the gut, respecting it, why is it that those things come later in life? I have learned so many lessons about what I know my body really craves and operates well on,
Mhm.
but it's come in my sixth decade. These are things that probably would have been so helpful for me to know, earlier in my life. But when you hit on those factors that really seem to make you feel like optimal wellness, you really feel good and whole, and your
Mhm.
body feels like it's yours and it's functioning well. It's fantastic, but it's sort of like trying to come up with the individual prescription of what works. And I wish I had figured some of that out sooner, but I
well,
didn't.
in in your own defense, Vicki, think about it this way.
Thank you. Absolve me, my friend.
I'm
Absolve
going
me.
to absolve all of
Okay.
us.
Okay, good. Good,
When
good.
we're younger, first of all, we know everything. So there's nothing we need to learn because
There's
we
that.
already got it all figured out.
Right, 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 right. Yeah,
The
that's
further
true.
you move into the crone years, the more you realize how little you actually know, and that your certainty is more of a something to sit with and contemplate as opposed to being certain.
Yeah,
The other thing is we truly are more able to just let those choices move through our system with less impact. So, you know, we hear people
yeah.
say all the time, I used to be able to go out late and still get up and go to work, no problem. I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to have, you know, wine with my friends during the week. Now it makes me not function as well during the workday. You know,
Mhm.
so those when we're young, we are more resilient in that sense, but also we're just more willing to override it. And we think of it as the suffering is kind of a cavalier warrior medal. You know, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I have a headache or I'm hungover because yeah, we were out clubbing. So yeah, what
Yeah,
do we need to get done today?
Right.
yeah, yeah. Oh my
Right.
gosh, it's so true. And if it's not that, it could be people that understand that they're really carb sensitive. And,
Mhm.
to Wynne and I talk about this, the desire that we have for sweets, but I also know how that's going to make me feel.
Mhm.
So it's those
Yeah.
insidious things that are sort of around us all the time, not just the going out and clubbing, but just making bad choices.
Yeah.
Bad.
Day in and day out. And, you know, uh,
Yeah.
it's a tough one to learn because there's the immediate little dopamine hit we get from the pleasure of the chocolate cake
Yeah.
and kind of in that moment, you know, and
Mhm.
we get the reward
Mhm.
cycle of the brain going, which is a
Yeah.
wonderful cycle, is it not?
Mhm.
Yes.
To delay that gratification for a more meta gratification, which is
Mhm.
feeling better, healthier
Mhm.
gut, isn't as um enchanting in the moment. It's like, yeah.
Well
Oh
said.
my gosh, definitely. Oh my gosh, perfectly put.
Yes.
Yes.
So Deirdre, you teach meditation, you yoga, you do workshops. Do you change your and you're an artist. Do you
Hmm.
change any of your teaching at this seasonal shift? I mean, do you shift anything?
That's a really good question. I do shift the focus and what I teach. Part of that is in response to noticing that the students are feeling different and wanting different things.
Mhm.
So people start to request more stretching, for example, instead of like,
Ah.
let's do plank 500 times, or whatever. Because they're, without realizing it, are responding to their own DNA wiring,
Mhm.
which is we don't need so many big power moves. And if you think about that back to our DNA, the power moves are going to require more calories and more energy. And if what we've
Hmm.
stored has to be used, let's not waste it all at the beginning
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
doing too much strong stuff. We have to
Hmm.
pace ourselves so that it matches that pacing of the cellar full of food.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
don't want to do as many power moves because the next batch isn't coming for a while. So we
Right.
learn to bring the motor down. We idle a little bit more low, and that's smart.
Mhm.
That's not just, oh, I'm so tired, I don't feel
Right.
motivated. It's
Right.
smart.
Yeah.
We haven't been here that long compared to the wiring of the planet and all the animals that were here before us. And um, we have this idea that we need to maintain exactly a certain level 24/7, 365. And it's
Mhm.
just not reality based. It's just
Mhm.
not biology based. And
Yeah.
so I teach what I would say is we overall move more slowly. The quieter poses we hold for longer periods of time, sometimes in the stronger poses. I leave more time for things that feel like stretching because we're sitting still more, we're
Hmm.
inside more, so we're
Hmm.
getting more compressed. We're not
Hmm.
dispersing it in the swimming or stand-up paddleboarding or whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We need to disperse the daily accumulation that way. And then I leave more time for either a restorative pose, which specifically is soothing and calming to the nervous
Mhm.
system, and more time for Shavasana, the resting
Mhm.
period at the end.
Hmm.
And I would say the breath practices, I tend to have them, the essence of them be more stabilizing to the vagus nerve. So our big nerve that calibrates, that has a lot to do with what part of the response we're in, sympathetic or parasympathetic. And what we want to do is try to balance that out so that it's not that we don't have swings, it's that the swings go more smoothly and we're more resilient in the swings.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the breath practices tend to favor balance, like even
Mhm.
inhale and exhales, even pauses, some cleansing breath where we valve the throat and let the exhale be longer, can bring up a little bit of heat in the body. So during the colder days, that kind of breath, the valving breath is excellent to do. More twisting poses because we're not
Hmm.
outside moving as much, and twisting supports good digestion.
Mhm.
And it
Hmm.
also releases the little muscles along the spine that get
Mhm.
compressed from being indoors and more sedentary.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, actually it does. I do significantly factor that in. So
Mhm.
my interest is always in having the practice, whether it's food or yoga or breath or art, reflect what is needed at
Mhm.
this time, and even
Hmm.
not just this time, but on this day, because we
Mhm.
vary day to day.
Hmm.
The practice that we need Saturday morning isn't the practice that we need to prepare for the week Sunday night. Those are
Hmm.
two different practices.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to pick a workout and then we want to do that workout all the time instead of
Yes.
custom tailor it just enough that
Yeah.
it's more responsive to the
Yeah.
current moment's needs. And,
Mhm.
you know, that's the optimal practice is the no plan practice. We're
Yeah.
back to that. You do the
That's
thing you need to do.
yeah.
Right.
So good. Deirdre, I love how you help us shift. I love these incredibly thoughtful and they just make sense, these practices that help us shift. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Thank
you for the
you.
opportunity. It's just been lovely to have this time with both of you.
Same. Thank you so much. Very actionable and doable. And so I
Mhm.
love that too. And
Right.
thank you, Deirdre. It was a treat.
You're welcome.